The city of Boston, a labyrinth of cobblestone streets and whispers of a bygone era, held a secret. Not a secret of history or forgotten treasures, but one that was etched into the heart of a man named Elias Thorne. Elias wasn't a man of grandeur. He was a clockmaker, a man who spent his days meticulously assembling the intricate gears of time, a trade he'd inherited from his grandfather. But unlike the perfect rhythm of his clocks, Elias's life was a symphony of silence and solitude. At 45, his face was a roadmap of sorrow, deep lines carved around his eyes and a permanent frown etched on his lips. His only companion was the ticking of countless timepieces in his small shop, each one a relentless reminder of the time he had lost, the family he had pushed away. It had been years since he'd spoken to his sister, Sarah. An argument, petty and insignificant in hindsight, had ballooned into an unbreachable chasm. The silence had been deafening, a void that had swallowed their shared memories, their laughter, their bond. He tried to fill it with work, with the methodical rhythm of his craft, but the void remained. It was a phantom limb, a constant ache he couldn't soothe. He was a man suspended in time, unable to move forward, unwilling to look back. The day it all began was a Tuesday, a day as gray and ordinary as any other. The sun struggled to pierce the overcast sky, casting a melancholic pallor over the city. Elias was hunched over a pocket watch, his tools gleaming under the single lamp on his workbench. The bell above his shop door jingled, a sound he had come to dread. He didn't want customers, didn't want to engage in the polite small talk that felt like a foreign language to him. But the person who entered wasn't a customer. She was a woman, perhaps in her late 60s, with a cascade of silver hair that framed a face lined with kindness. She wasn't carrying a clock or a watch. Instead, she held a small, unassuming envelope. "Elias Thorne?" she asked, her voice soft but clear. He grunted in confirmation, his eyes still glued to the intricate gears. "I was told to deliver this to you," she said, placing the envelope on his workbench. "It's from an old friend." He eyed the envelope with suspicion. The handwriting was elegant, unfamiliar. He didn't have any old friends, not anymore. His world had shrunk to the four walls of his shop. The only people he saw were the occasional customer and the gruff mailman. He picked up the envelope, the paper crisp and thick. It felt personal. He opened it, his fingers fumbling slightly. Inside was a single birthday card, the kind you'd find in a dusty old shop, with a faded painting of a lighthouse on the front. He wasn't sure who it was for. His birthday wasn't for another 6 months. He opened the card, his breath catching in his throat. The message inside was simple, handwritten in the same elegant script as the envelope. "I hope this finds you well, Elias. I've been keeping track of your birthday for the past 20 years, even though we haven't spoken. It's a silly tradition, I know. I just wanted you to know that I still think of you, and I miss you. A." Elias read the message again, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. Who was A? He racked his brain, searching for a face, a name, a memory. The only person he knew with a name that began with A was his great-aunt, who had passed away years ago. This couldn't be from her. And the message, it was a paradox. It was intimate yet anonymous. It spoke of a shared history, a shared silence. He turned the card over in his hands, examining every detail, every curve of the letters. He noticed a small, almost imperceptible smudge on the card, a faint smear of what looked like ink. It was too small to be a clue, too insignificant to be anything. But in his silent world, every detail was a potential earthquake. He looked up, but the woman was gone. The only evidence of her visit was the card, sitting like a time bomb on his workbench. The ticking of his clocks seemed to grow louder, more insistent. The silence, once his constant companion, now felt like a prelude to a scream. This card, this simple, unassuming piece of paper, wasn't just a birthday greeting. It was a key, a whisper from the past, a thread of hope that he had long given up on. It was a lifeline thrown into a sea of regret, and he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he had to follow it. He had to find it. He had to know who was still thinking of him after all these years. This was more than a birthday card. This was a mystery, and it was tied to the very thing he had spent 2 decades running from: his family. The story of Elias Thorne, the solitary clockmaker, was about to take a turn, and he had no idea where the hands of time would lead him. The card sat on his workbench for days, a silent monument to his bewilderment. Elias tried to dismiss it, to bury it under the weight of his daily routine. He polished brass, oiled gears, and tightened springs, but his mind kept returning to the elegant script, the single initial A, and the haunting words, "I miss you." The simple card had shattered the carefully constructed fortress of his solitude. He found himself staring out the window, his gaze unfocused, seeing not the bustling street but the ghost of a memory. A family Christmas, the warmth of the fireplace, the sound of laughter. His sister, Sarah, her fiery red hair a beacon in the room, her voice a melody he had long forgotten. He had been a fool to let a stupid argument tear them apart. He had been a coward to let the silence fester for so long. Driven by a desperation he hadn't felt in years, he began his search. He couldn't go to the police. What would he say? "Someone sent me a birthday card and I don't know who they are?" It would sound ludicrous. He had to be his own detective. His first clue was the card itself. He took a magnifying glass and meticulously examined it, not for clues, but for the smudge he had seen earlier. There it was, a tiny, almost invisible speck of ink. He had a hunch, a desperate one, that it might be a fingerprint. But how could he get it analyzed? He had no connections, no resources. He was just a clockmaker in a small shop. He remembered a customer, an elderly man named Mr. Peterson, who was a retired detective. He had brought in a grandfather clock that hadn't worked in decades, a family heirloom that he wanted to see brought back to life. Elias had spent weeks on it, meticulously restoring every part until it sang with a perfect, resonant chime. He found Mr. Peterson's address in his old ledger and, with a pounding heart, made the journey. The old detective lived in a quiet suburb, his house a testament to a life well lived. He listened patiently as Elias recounted the bizarre story, his eyes a mixture of curiosity and sympathy. Mr. Peterson, after a long silence, agreed to help. He had a friend, a forensic expert, who owed him a favor. The results came back a week later. It wasn't a fingerprint. It was something far stranger, far more chilling. The smudge was a combination of ink and something else. Something that the forensic expert couldn't quite identify but was sure was organic. He also found a faint chemical residue on the envelope, a unique combination of trace elements that pointed to a specific type of paper and ink, one that was no longer produced commercially. It was a dead end, a technological ghost. But Mr. Peterson, with the wisdom of a seasoned investigator, pointed out the obvious. The sender wanted you to find this, Elias. They wanted you to know they exist. They wanted you to be curious. This is a game. A game. The word resonated with Elias. It felt like a cruel joke, a twisted prank. But who would do this? And why? He went back to the only other person he had left, his ex-wife, Lena. Their marriage had ended years ago, a casualty of his withdrawal from the world after the fight with Sarah. They were still on civil terms, a fragile truce born of mutual respect and shared history. He showed her the card, his voice trembling as he explained the situation. Lena, a pragmatic and sharp-minded woman, immediately saw the possibilities. It could be a code, she mused. Maybe it's not a name. Maybe it's a place. Or a date. The idea was a shock to Elias. He had been so focused on the name, he hadn't considered the other possibilities. A place? A date? He looked at the card again, this time with a new perspective. The lighthouse. He'd never been to a lighthouse with his family. But his grandfather, he was a lighthouse keeper before he became a clockmaker. The family had a vacation home near a lighthouse, a small cottage on the coast of Maine. The memories were distant, hazy, like photographs bleached by the sun. Could this be the connection? Could it be a reference to the Annisquam Harbor Lighthouse? He remembered his grandfather mentioning it once, a place of peace and solitude. It felt like a long shot, a desperate reach into the past. But it was the only lead he had. The realization was a punch to the gut. The card wasn't just a random act of kindness. It was a message, a carefully constructed puzzle designed to guide him back to a place he had forgotten, to a memory he had buried. The person who sent this knew his family history. They knew about his grandfather, about the lighthouse. This was no stranger. This was someone intimately connected to his past, someone who had watched him from the shadows, someone who was now pulling him back into the light. Elias felt a cold dread creep up his spine. This was more than a game. This was a reckoning. He was being drawn into a web of secrets, and he had a terrifying feeling that the person who sent the card wasn't just trying to rekindle a lost bond, but was trying to reveal a truth that had been hidden for decades. The journey to Annisquam Harbor was a pilgrimage, a race against time and a leap of faith. The drive was a blur, the landscape a montage of green forests and gray asphalt. Elias felt a sense of anticipation mixed with dread, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. The closer he got to the coast of Maine, the more the memories flooded back. The smell of the salt air, the cry of the gulls, the relentless crashing of waves against the shore. These were not his memories alone. They were echoes of his childhood, the ghosts of a family he had long abandoned. The cottage was just as he remembered it, a small, weathered house perched on a cliff, overlooking the turbulent Atlantic. It was a monument to a simpler time, a happier time. The porch swing still hung from the rafters, creaking in the wind, a silent testament to the laughter that had once filled the space. He unlocked the front door, the key turning with a rusty groan, a sound that seemed to waken the house from its long slumber. The air inside was still, thick with the scent of dust and memory. Everything was exactly as they had left it. The old rocking chair, the faded floral couch, the dusty photographs on the mantelpiece. His gaze fell on a particular picture, a black and white photograph of his grandfather, a young, strapping man with a kind smile, standing in front of the very lighthouse on the card. Next to him was a woman, his grandmother, her hand resting gently on his arm. But in the corner of the photo, half hidden by a shadow, was a third person, a child. A little boy with a shock of dark hair, his face obscured by the angle. He'd never noticed that before. A knot of unease tightened in his stomach. He was being watched. He could feel it. The card, the lighthouse, the cottage. This was a staged reunion, a theatrical play with him as the reluctant star. He walked through the house, his footsteps echoing in the silent rooms, a feeling of unease growing with every step. He went into his grandfather's old study, a room filled with books and old maps. He ran his hand over the dusty surface of the mahogany desk, a place where his grandfather had spent countless hours. He opened a drawer and found an old, leather-bound journal. It was his grandfather's. He hadn't seen it in decades. He opened it, his fingers tracing the elegant script, the same script from the birthday card. His heart froze. The journal was a history, not just of his grandfather's life, but of a secret that had been buried for generations. The journal spoke of a love affair, a forbidden love, a secret child. His grandfather had been in love with a woman from a neighboring town, a woman who was already married. Their affair had been brief, passionate, and had resulted in a child, a son. His grandfather had been heartbroken, but had done the honorable thing, leaving the woman to her life and her husband, and raising his own family. But he had never forgotten his firstborn son. He had kept track of him from afar, watching him grow up from a distance, a silent guardian. The journal mentioned the boy's name, Arthur. Arthur. The letter on the card. Elias's world tilted on its axis. He had a half-uncle he never knew existed, a ghost of a relative, a lost branch on the family tree. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The card, the lighthouse, the cottage. It was all a trail of breadcrumbs, a carefully crafted map leading him not to his sister, but to a secret that had been hidden for decades. He looked at the photographs again, at the image of his grandfather, his grandmother, and the mysterious child. He looked closer, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. The child's face, though obscured, had the same dark hair as his grandfather. It was his great-uncle, the man who had sent him the card. A sound from outside startled him, a low, guttural growl. He peered out the window, his heart in his throat. Standing on the porch, staring directly at the house, was a man. He was tall, his shoulders broad, his face a web of wrinkles and a lifetime of hard work. He had a shock of silver hair, and in his hand, he was holding a single, unassuming envelope. The same envelope from the birthday card. Elias felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. This wasn't a game. This was a confrontation. This was a reckoning. The ghost of Annisquam Harbor had come to life, and he was here to claim what was his. The man's gaze was steady, his eyes a piercing blue, holding a depth of sorrow and a hint of steel. This was the man who had been watching him for 20 years. This was Arthur. And Elias knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the silent clockmaker and the hidden son of his grandfather were about to have a conversation that would change their lives, and the very foundation of their family, forever. Arthur stood on the porch, his eyes a steady blue gaze, unwavering. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence was louder than any words, a language of its own, filled with a lifetime of unspoken resentments and unacknowledged love. Elias walked out onto the porch, the old wood groaning under his weight. He held the journal in his hands, a silent accusation, a testament to a truth that had just been revealed. The two men, a clockmaker and a ghost, stood in the shadow of a family secret, the salt air whipping around them, a furious wind of change. "You knew," Elias said, his voice a low growl. "You knew all along." Arthur nodded slowly. "I knew our grandfather was my father. I knew about this place. I knew about you. I have watched you for years, Elias. I have watched you build a wall around yourself, a wall of silence and solitude. I have watched you let a stupid fight with your sister destroy a family. I have watched you become a ghost in your own life." The words were a physical blow, a punch to the gut. They were harsh, but they were also the truth. Elias had been a ghost, haunting the halls of his own regret. He had let his anger consume him, let it poison his relationships, let it turn him into a man who was alone in a world of clocks. "Why the card?" Elias asked, his voice shaking. "Why now?" Arthur's gaze softened, a flicker of something akin to pain in his eyes. "I'm not getting any younger, Elias. The secrets of the past are heavy burdens. I didn't want to carry them to my grave. I wanted you to know. I wanted you to understand. But I also wanted to see if you were still capable of caring." The card was a test, a breadcrumb, a message in a bottle. I wanted to see if you would be brave enough to follow it. Elias looked at the man, this stranger who was also family. He saw the pain in his eyes, the deep-seated loneliness, the longing for a connection he had never had. He saw a man who had been watching his family from the shadows, a silent guardian, a forgotten son. The anger that had been simmering inside him for years suddenly evaporated, replaced by a wave of profound sorrow and a deep, aching empathy. He understood now. Arthur wasn't a villain. He wasn't a prankster. He was a victim of circumstance, a man who had been denied the one thing he craved most, a family. "My sister," Elias whispered, the name a painful echo. "You know about her, too?" Arthur nodded. "She's in Boston. She's been asking about you. She's been trying to reach you. But you've made yourself impossible to find." The truth was a bitter pill to swallow. Elias had been so consumed by his own grief and anger that he had missed the signs. He had ignored the phone calls, the letters, the attempts at reconciliation. He had built his walls so high that he couldn't see the light of hope shining through. Arthur took a step closer, his eyes gentle. "This isn't just about me, Elias. This is about you. This is about your family. The past is a tricky thing. It can be a chain that holds you back, or it can be a foundation to build on. It's your choice. You can stay here in this house of ghosts and memories, or you can go back. You can go back and fix what you broke. You can go back to your sister." The words were a wake-up call, a splash of cold water in the face. Elias looked at the journal in his hands, at the photographs on the mantelpiece, at the lighthouse in the distance. He had been a prisoner of his past, a man trapped in a clock of his own making. But Arthur had given him a key, a way out. He had given him a chance to turn back the hands of time, not to erase the past, but to fix the future. He looked at Arthur, a half-smile on his lips. "Thank you," he said, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. "Thank you, eh?" Arthur smiled back, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. "You're welcome, Elias. Now go. You have a sister to find." Elias turned, walking away from the cottage, away from the ghost of Annisquam Harbor, and toward a future he had given up on. He had a family to find, a bond to mend, a life to reclaim. The journey had started with a single, unassuming birthday card from a stranger, but it was ending with a promise to himself, to his sister, and to a family he had never known he had. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid. The ticking of his clocks no longer sounded like a reminder of loss. They sounded like a new beginning. And you, our amazing viewers, if you've been on this journey with Elias, if his story has touched a chord in you, don't let it end here. Don't let your own story be one of silence and solitude. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel to join us on more incredible journeys into the heart of human stories. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We're not just telling stories. We're building a community, one shared experience at a time. Thank you for watching.